Hey, so I thought today I would talk a little bit about what prompted me to go to this Celebrate Recovery meeting last night that I went to. And I think a lot of what um, made me want to go and check this thing out was um just the fact that Jesus calls us to die. You know, Jesus calls us to turn away from material things and from temptation and die in our sin and be reborn in Him. And I think that that's a very inspirational and possible. Uh, I think it's a possibility. I think that people can find happiness through Christ and through um, not necessarily the rituals of Christianity, but through Jesus' words. And I think that if you really pay close attention to what Jesus is saying, a lot of times are um, there are double meanings, and there are he says himself that he he doesn't say tell the he says everything as a parable because um, the unwashed masses would hear the truth and turn and be saved. That's not a direct quote, but I mean, it's the closest I can come to right now. I had a stroke in 2015, and my memory is a little bit shoddy, but I do have a pretty good understanding of the Bible and Christianity, I think, and I'm not completely. I wouldn't call myself a fundamentalist by any means. I find that the church, the Christian church today, I think that Jesus would probably be somewhat disappointed in because uh, he didn't believe in the temple. He disbanded the temple. That was his whole thing, you know. And we learn nothing by our traditions. So I think that any type of ritualistic Christian practice is probably further away from what Jesus would have wanted than I just don't think Jesus would have particularly wanted that. Um, and though the service, I'm not too keen on the service portion of Smart Recovery. I don't like the singing and like praise portion of it. Not that I have any problem with praising God or any, no matter how you choose to do that. That's your right and your. I'm just saying, for me personally, it was not something that I particularly cared for, and I don't really see much value in that type of worship. Not that it doesn't do great things for some people, I'm sure. But what made me curious about this Celebrate Recovery thing is that you know my coming to God or my spiritual path has been a very long and hard road, and I in my addiction and in my teenage years, I was fascinated with the occult and uh, Levian Satanism and Aleister Crowley and just very uh, dark spiritualists, and I liked Madame Blavatsky and uh, Albert Pike and all of these guys, all these people that had alternative views of mostly Western culture, but they did, or Western religion, but they did tie in some Eastern aspects into their uh, theologies. And I think that any type of religion like that, any theosophy or thelema or any type of religion like that is kind of contrived, and it's always going to to rely on something else. And in a way, you could say that Christianity is not far off from that, because if you look back into Egyptian and Babylonian mythology, it's very close. The story of Horus is very close to the story of Jesus, and um, the Babylonian creation myth is not too far off from the Christian creation myth, or the Jewish creation story. So I think there is some truth to all of these things tying together and having somewhat of a spiritual truth, and the Word of God being written on your heart. Uh, I think that's true. I think that I think the Word of God is written on every man, and that we shouldn't have to necessarily follow these books that tell you that the Word of God is written on your heart. I mean, it's good to have that affirmation, that affirmation, and that just it's good to have something to uh, verify your suspicions about spiritual things. And that's why I never knock any type of religion or any type of spiritual thought, because I think it's all good. I think, you know, if you are contemplating your spirituality, at least you're at least you're doing that. I don't care if you're, you know, you can find good and bad things in everything. That's true of the Muslim religion. It's true of the Christian religion. It's true of the Jewish religion. It's true of Buddhists. It's true of everyone. There, Hindus. There are good and bad seeds in every group, and I I tend to relate the most to the Christian orthodoxy, and I just tend to relate more to the story of Jesus than I do the Old Testament, or you know the Hadith, or any of these other religious texts. I tend to not just the Bible, but I like biblical literature. I like reading the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I like just looking into different aspects of Christian lore. Uh, and I think it's a fascinating part of our culture, and that's what really led me to want to be at that Celebrate Recovery meeting last night. What led me to go, and I don't regret it, honestly. Even though I'm not a huge fan of the Christian service that they have beforehand, I don't know that that's necessarily mandatory. I think you could probably still go to the meeting and not go to the service. And I'm probably going to go to the service next week, just because I feel like if I were to just go to the meeting, then that might be disrespectful in some way. I don't want to in any way disrespect these people's the way that they worship, or the way that they get closer to God. I don't want to be disrespectful, and I don't want to in any way change someone's mind about God, or about spirituality, or anything like that. That's not my intent when I'm telling you what I believe personally. I'm just telling you what my experience is and what I have found to be true and to work in my life. And I'm not trying to change what you think, but if you hear something and it does sound relatable, feel free to look more into the topics that I bring up. No one is stopping you, and that's the great thing about A, being an American, and B, just being uh, you know born during this time, living during this time. It's information is so available, and you can form much more in-depth, well-rounded thoughts due to the availability of information. And I think that if you are not looking into these types of things and you're just assuming, or you're just, you're just, you know, subscribing to these scientific or religious ideas without giving them any type of deeper thought. I think you're doing yourself a disservice, because no one is right 100% of the time, and you know even the most scientific, you know the 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 forefathers of atheism were spiritualists and channeled ghosts and spirits. So you know just I'm not going to try to, like, I'm not trying to change your mind if you are an atheist and you do think that Christianity is stupid or whatever. That's whatever. I don't care. That's your thing. Like, live your life, do whatever you want to do, you know. But if you want to make a change in your life and you want to do something positive, I think Celebrate Recovery is worth looking into. And if you go and you check it out and you don't like it, you don't have to go back, you know. But maybe you might. And I think it is. I think when you go and you see these people and they're behaving in a they just seem happy. They seem happy to be there. They seem just stoked, honestly. And it's been a long time since I've been around a group of people that genuinely seem interested in one another and seem to give a fuck about one another. And it was good for me. I enjoyed it, and I'm gonna go back. So check it out. If you don't like it, you don't have to go back.